From the beautiful and historic campus of Heritage International Ministries in Fort Mill, South Carolina, home of MorningStar Fellowship Church, Heritage International Conference Center, and MorningStar University, we bring you Prophetic Perspectives on Current Events with Rick Joyner. Now let's join Rick for insights and analysis on the important events and issues of our times.
Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us today. We've got a powerful show for you. Returning with me, Dr. Lance Wallnau. I'm Dave Yarnes, the Vice President of MorningStar Ministry. And yesterday, on the last show, Lance started to bring up some topics that were absolutely mind-bending. Lance, you said that we could find hope in the midst of these headlines that are coming out, in the midst of things raging around us, that not only could I find hope, but I could fuel myself off them. I could use this to make myself more congruent with what God has for me. Talk to us about that. I mean, it's powerful stuff, but how do we put that into...
Yeah. Imagine a fighter who actually gets more... It's almost like that Rocky. What Rocky was it where he's up against Mr. T? And
I'm saying it's about three.
About three. Rocky
yeah.
3? Okay. And there's this scene where he's first in the ring, and he's intimidated. And he's afraid. And he looks like he's going to get hurt, and he's all self-conscious. One thing anyone who plays sports or athletics knows is, if you're worried about getting hurt, you're never playing
die.
good.
Yeah.
It's it's those guys are watching these world-class rugby matches when I'm in Australia, and they just love it.
It's like watching paint dry. I'm sorry, but
well, no, not. I'm not talking about cricket. I'm talking about rugby.
I'm sorry,
and soccer. So there's a perpetual motion, and the guy goes off to the sidelines, got his finger broken, and you see the other guy going like that. He goes, and he's back up going. I'm ready to contact OSHA and sue somebody. I mean, I got Jewish in me. I'm doing disability for 6 months. But you see a guy, nose broken, goes over the sideline, like that, get back in. He's in there. They're not thinking about the pain because this is the glory. It's like, don't take me out of the game.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking that there's a mentality of an overcomer.
That's
that
the
literally
key,
takes, instead of fear, the point with Rocky 3 or whatever it is or Rocky 2, is that the second fight, as he's getting hit, there's that great scene where he's in the other guy's face going, "You ain't so bad, you ain't so bad." And Mr. T's losing it, and the guy goes, he's going to get hurt. He goes, no, he's getting angry.
Oh, nice.
When there's a point where you get pushed, and the zeal of the Lord arouses. It's kind of like the psalmist says, "Oh, Lord, awaken thyself," because, the heathen are mocking you. It's almost like wake up from your slumber, like all of a sudden, David waking up as he's about to have Adonijah, the wrong son, be king, and poor Solomon's going to get slaughtered. It's like he wakes himself up and he goes, "Whoa, hey, get me, all right, get me Zadok, get me back, get the priest. Let's sort this mess out." That's an overcomer. An overcomer the stress brings out the best.
And that's the spirit that we have to release, ladies and gentlemen. That's the spirit that we have to release right now. You were particularly born for this hour. Now, my sports analogy would be the guy that stands at home plate and going through his mind, he says, "Don't strike out. Don't strike out. Don't strike out." Or the guy that stands up there and says, "Man, I'm going to knock the cover off this ball. I'm going to put it out of the park." That's the analogy that I like.
Right. But what happens? For those of us that haven't done the home plate experience, if you're focusing on not striking out,
you're going to strike out. You're gonna lose it every time. So if in your mind you're watching what's happening, unveiling in the world, and your mind is going immediately to, how do I protect? How do I keep this? How do I bury my talent in the ground so that when the Lord comes, I'll give it back to him? You're gonna lose, because the Lord comes back and he says to the one talent man that buried it, he says, "You wicked and lazy slave. You should have put my money to use." This is the time for us to be fired up, to see our calling coming.
Yeah, I think I got to say something to somebody out there, just because you're talking. I worked with a sports psychologist, and the sports psychologist talked to me about how he would save millions of dollars for franchises because he knew how to read the data on the guys psychologically. He had information on them.
Really? Yeah.
And I said, well, for instance, like if you're talking baseball, 'cause that's one of my coming from the Northeast, New York Yankees and
Sure.
stuff. So I was like, tell me about baseball. He said, he says, we look for the abasement scale. I go, the abasement scale. He goes, yeah. The abasement scale, now catch this, Christian. The abasement scale is the degree to which you beat yourself up because you don't measure up to your own expectations.
Oh.
And I said, what does that mean? He said, well, more than anything. He said, every athlete gets into a slump. They have a couple of bad games. If you have critical abasement scales, he said, I would probably flag you as the sports psychologist working for ESPN. And I would talk to the owners before putting money on you because I'd want to work with you to get you to shift your mind. Get the helmet of hope.
Oh,
these are Christian athletes too.
Yeah,
it's not just this is universal, folks. That if they haven't, this is some of you out there. We want to break that today by impartation. If you have a tendency to beat yourself up for missing the will of God, not doing what you're supposed to do, not being spiritual enough, not measuring up, always trying to catch up, if that's you, trust me, there's no aspect of humility in that position that secretly you could say, but the Lord knows, at least I'm, humble and contrite. Because that's actually not humble, that's weak.
Yeah.
Because once you get in a slump as an athlete, you can't come out if you're stuck with the abasement scale. So what these sports psychologists told me is, it's all based on self-talk. And that the guy who comes out of the slump is the guy who has aggression about the slump. He's mad. He says, you ever see these guys? They hit something, they yell, they cuss, they spit.
Right.
The person who is beating himself up doesn't manifest anything because in their head, they're hitting themselves.
We have to stop right there, but we're going to come back right after this commercial. You don't want to miss it. Hi, I'm Dave Yarns, Vice President of MorningStar Ministry, and I want to continue right in this vein. We were talking about this ability and the abasement scale. I love that concept because, now listen, it's in the Pilgrim's Progress, Bunyan says that when Christians first come to the Lord, he calls it the slough of despond, where I start to realize in the presence of a holy God that redeems me, this kind of wickedness and stuff that goes there. But you can't stay there. There is a kingdom to build. There's a destiny for you. You've got to see yourself redeemed. You've got to see yourself primed for the occasion. So just talk to me a little bit more about that abasement scale. So the sports psychologists are weeding people out based on their ability. Now, in my mind, I'm thinking, if I'm in no other sport like baseball, I think, because if you get in a slump, the mental state of that and turning it back around, that's what we're talking about as we face the economy, as we face what's coming down the road, getting that abasement broken off. That is brilliant.
Yeah, having the helmet of hope.
I guess that's why they give you the doctor in there, right?
That's right. Yeah, that's right, because we do a little of it all. But when the Roman soldier had the helmet on his head, when Paul looked at the centurions, who were the particular officers assigned to keep him as a political prisoner, the officers had inscribed, David, every campaign that they had in the side of their helmet, which meant that the higher rank you were, the more inscription. Like you'd have medals and ribbons in our armies. Well, they had inscriptions, so they would have the battle of this, the battle of that, so that it was inscribed. So when you got the centurion helmet, it was, and what's beautiful about this is the metaphor's perfect. You have got to take the word of God and etch it into your mind. The helmet of hope isn't some arbitrary thing that comes down your head at a beauty salon. Yeah. You actually etch the words in, casting down imaginations and every high thing, every thought coming down. The abasement scale in psychology is when your helmet gets knocked off your head because you failed to measure up to the test. You lost it. You sinned. It was either doubt, anxiety, worry, or flat out you blew it. Now what the devil wants to do is to keep the helmet off your head for a couple of days so you beat yourself up till you feel bad enough, like you've done bad, like you're ready to put it back on and kind of come slinking back to the Lord. Forgive me, Lord, I'm just a terrible sinner. The problem with that is that the abasement scale is a beating yourself up scale psychologically that robs you of the speed of recovery to go to the next time at bat and whack that thing out of the park.
Now, I wasn't going to talk about this, but this is what we can do because we're on television, we're watching. This is a true personal note for me. I went through a tough time several years back where businesses were sliding, and just in my mind I was saying, Lord, where are you? And I sat with Dr. Lance Wallnau. We took some coffee together, and he told me about changing the story to an empowering story. Lance, that affected my life.
Oh, wow.
Because in what had happened is that, the 12 spies that went out and spied out the land, they came back and they were technically accurate. But the Bible says they brought an evil report. Why was it an evil report? Because of what it was aimed to do. It was aimed to discourage. And in my mind, my helmet started to crack. I started to doubt myself. I started to doubt whether God had called me to certain things. And you sat down with me, and in a couple of hours, you started to turn that to an empowering scale. And you pulled out kind of the dross of the elixir of the poison out.
Right.
So, is that something that continually we're going through as Christians?
This is where loving one another, it becomes so indispensable. It's so hard to do this thing on your own. I still struggle in areas of my life longer than I need to, simply because I don't know who to talk about in terms of bearing one another's burdens. Sometimes you simply need to have someone else give you the kingdom perspective. Jesus needs to speak through another perspective to you, because when you're in the warfare, you can't see what you don't see. So like in your case, as in many cases, I see the calling and the greatness of the person who's expanding under the pressure of contradiction in order to become a greater level. And we mistake the fact that we have to expand with the fact that we're not ready yet.
Yeah.
But the truth is, David said this, "Thou hast enlarged me in my distress." It was while he was having these moments of despair that God was expanding his capacity to occupy his destiny.
I want to speak specifically right now. I just felt virtue come out of that. That could be you right now. You're feeling that distress because God is expanding you and getting a hold of this, changing your mindset, getting a hold of this hope-filled view is absolutely essential. It's critical to this time. And I just, part of my heart, I feel, especially during the programs, this kind of pastoral heart coming out and just, sensing where people are at. And I just want to again say, Lord is with you. God is with you. He loves you. He's taking you through this time. And we're going to come back and we're going to look at some of these essential points that Dr. Lance Wallnau is bringing. We'll be right back.